Well, the TGP Global Finals started yesterday. And with the TGP Global Finals starting yesterday, I think that there were three favorites coming into the weekend. It was Mandatory, Echo, and Missed Count. That was like the upper tier of teams. And then I think the lower tier teams were Pager's Power, Madge, and Dratnos Guild Team. The upper tier teams being the teams that are the most likely to win the TGP, and the lower tier teams meaning that it would take I would say an incredible change from what we saw during the Cup weekend for them to be able to win the TGP. Now, group day one being concluded. Echo and Mandatory are at the top of the leaderboard, and Miscount surprisingly at the bottom. I'll talk about Miscount a little bit first. They had a really hard time in Uldaman 20. They reset this dungeon over and over again, not even able to put up a 21 on the board. That's very concerning. For Mandatory and Echo both looked excellent. Mandatory by far looked like the best team over the weekend. The only team to put up a 21 Uldaman. A lot of teams were actually kind of close to the timer on the 20, whereas Mandatory was not. A lot of that came down to, though, the Warlock pick in Uldaman. Particularly this first pull, I gave Mandatory a lot of leeway timer-wise in the 21 Uldaman, to the point where we were kind of questioning as to whether or not the 22 was going to be possible for a team of this caliber. The Warlock, pretty uncommon pick. We did see both Mandatory and Dratnos Guild Team busting out that Warlock in Uldaman. Dratnos Guild Team also actually elected to play the Warlock in Algothar Academy. Warlock very good at high mob density dungeons where trash is going to be the main focal point. It really speeds you up a lot more than Mage on those trash sections. The downside is that you sacrifice a decent amount of survivability for playing that Warlock. But whenever you're able to do a 2-minute, 20-second Lost Vikings first boss split into like a very, very fast Bromax split, that's going to speed you up basically more than the Mage was going to help you increase your survivability. Hopeful, not exactly known for his Warlock gameplay, but he's just going to be pressing Rain of Fire over and over again until the trash pack is dead, and then the boss is going to soon follow for Mandatory in this clip. Now, being the nerd that I am, I mapped out Mandatory's exact route. There's a couple of pulls that are important. Obviously, this first pull that I marked down was probably one of the most important pulls, but then they also do a couple of things that are unique. They also take the hulking berserkers into the boss, and what they have is a reckless rage cast. And whenever the reckless rage goes off at 60% HP, it causes all enemies within 20 yards to deal 20% more damage, but also take 20% more damage. And so whenever you take triple berserker into Bromac, you are able to kind of dispose of that boss rather quickly. This comp is actually pretty bad at killing Bromac. The reason that they're pretty bad at killing Bromac is largely due to the fact that Warlock can't kill the ambusher ads off rather quickly. And so whenever you have the ambusher ads leaping on players like Hopeful, like Stove, like Mode, it opens up the possibility for people to get leapt on and die. And so that's really bad. Then the second pull that's like pretty pivotal is honestly this pull 5. They do it right after Sentinel Telandris, and just the sheer size of this pull. Let's go back and look at it exactly. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 packs of trash that they're lusting here at the 12 or at the 13-minute mark, and this pull is absolutely disgusting. This is a Warlock special. The infernal stuns, Warlock Demon Hunter Evoker is having 100% of the control of the pack. The free stuns on the Hail of Stone, just the amount of raw damage that the Warlock is going to be able to do on this pull is kind of nasty. Look, both Hopeful and Stover at 5 million DPS. Typically, whenever you're seeing a Mage here, they're going to be at like 3 million DPS, not really letting this pull be something that you can within reason do. And so with those two pulls, Mandatory is very far into the timer. They timed the 21 Uldaman world record key with 5 deaths. I'm questioning as to whether or not 22 is on the table as a chase key on Sunday. I don't think it's going to be necessarily something that we see immediately, but I do think that it could be something that we see for Sunday. Beyond that, I would say that everybody, if you watched Group A and Group B, everybody played pretty standard. The 22 ALG Academies across the board are world record level keys. Nobody has put up a 22 on live prior to this. We did see a couple of the 22s during group play. Mandatory currently has the fastest 22 that we even saw during group play, so they have the world record noted on their tag whenever you're watching the TGP as well. But yeah, the only other notable thing that I saw tech-wise in the TGP was Potions of Frozen Fatality being used very frequently by the tank of Echo now. Basically, So it reads like it will drop combat, right? It says drink to collapse to the ground, frozen in a state of near death for 30 minutes, tricking enemies into ignoring you. It doesn't actually drop you out of combat. Now, it doesn't share a CD with damage or healing potions, and so it can be kind of nice in that regard. And so you might ask, if it doesn't actually drop you out of combat, why is now using them like on CD? And so you can actually look at the bottom left here. You can see now is he's doing a skip right here. And so whenever he does a skip, he VRs away, he melds, and then he pops the potion at the exact same time. And by popping the potion at the exact same time, he's giving himself a little bit of insurance because these golems actually have true sight. So he's getting meld insurance whenever he's pressing it sometimes. Now that's not the only reason that he's pressing it. He's pressing it about 5 times a dungeon on average. And whenever he's pressing it 5 times a dungeon on average, a lot of it comes down to alchemy procs. So he gets a little bit of movement speed and he gets a little bit of healing every single time he presses it. And so it's basically just free. And so he's just ripping them as often as possible. And so what you can... The other thing too, the other tech that I actually wanted to show off was what Echo was doing, not just with the Potion of Frozen Fatality, but with what Now was doing. So you saw him skipping that golem, and you might ask, like, where's the rest of his party? Basically, the rest of his party used the mole machine after Emberon to go back to the start of the dungeon, and then whenever they use the mole machine to go back to the start of the dungeon, whenever Now walks into this room, that unlocks the mole machine gamma checkpoint, allowing Echo then to, instead of having to press all their melds and like, I don't even know if you can actually skip that golem with this comp and doing a bunch of different stuff to like actually slow down the pull. Instead, they just send Now ahead. Now unlocks the checkpoint. They port back, and then they port to this gamma checkpoint, and then the entire team of Echo shows up here and is able to fight this trash pack. Speeding them up a little bit. Obviously, they're going to be playing a little bit of a different route than some of the other teams because they're doing this porting around thing. But it can be a pretty big time save depending on their route. So that's that. Basically, mandatory, definitely in the driver's seat. If they have a day 2 as strong as they had during their day 1, I kind of expect them to win. Most of the dungeons are only doable on a 21 level. It's pretty rare to actually see dungeons being done on a 22 level during this TGP, just due to dungeon scaling. The dungeon scaling is very aggressive this season. Brackenhide has a chance to... Brackenhide will basically be put up on a 21 straight across the board. It's unlikely to be done on a 22. The affixes are not very favorable for it. This is also the first time we've seen Uldaman, so maybe we'll see an Eltherist. Hopefully we see an Eltherist. Maybe it's like a Sunday key. So we'll see. I think that it's going to be a very interesting TGP weekend, and I hope you guys enjoy the content, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.